license to steal, we don't need one. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, gosh, that sounds like Lloyd Blankfein of the Goldman Sachs crime family. And you'd be right. Stacy?
Well, it all comes together in this first headline, Max. How the Teamsters pension disappeared more quickly under Wall Street than the mob. Real estate investments in Las Vegas casinos and hotels once threatened the integrity of a Teamsters pension fund that the federal government wrested away from corrupt trustees and organized crime after 5 years of legal battles. That was 25 years ago. A quarter of a century later, cut to today, the professionals who replaced them, Central States Pension Fund Administrator, the Goldman Sachs and Company, and Northern Trust Global Advisors, fiduciaries, and Department of Labor regulators stood watch while the financial markets accomplished what the mob had failed to, which was to smash the fund's long-term solvency with massive money-losing investments. Now, part of it is they convinced regulators, and in fact, there were regulators on their board of fiduciary, advisors, and they convinced Congress and regulators that, they needed to make up for losses from the mob and also because of low interest rates and all that stuff, so that they had to put everything in the markets. That was 2005, and we know what happened after. Their fund collapsed by 42%.
Yeah, well, this is bookended by two blockbuster movies. The Godfather, which was a take on the mafia in America, and then recently we had The Big Short, which is a take on the Wall Street mafia, openly and brazenly stealing hundreds of billions of dollars. And the Teamsters pension fund, unfortunately, got whacked by both the mafia and the Wall Street mafia. But they're two sides of the same coin. It's not a victimless crime. I mean, it's very flashy to see wise guys whack guys in the alley and bleed out in the street and talk about being a made man. But on Wall Street, the crimes take 5, 6, 7 years to perpetrate, to percolate through the system. They kill just as many, they kill a lot more people than the mafia did, but it takes a little bit of, it takes some time for the financial disenfranchisement to work its way into the system. But the poor Teamsters, though, it's sad that they gave their trust to a Goldman Sachs or to Wall Street.
They didn't give their trust to them. The government took it away from the mob. The mob had actually relatively sound investments compared to what Goldman Sachs did. They had sound investment in property in Las Vegas. Now, also remember, the previous mob under Gambino, what they did is they also controlled politicians, but they only controlled local and state-level politicians. So then the FBI and all the federal agencies came in and smashed up all the mob, and they took over it, and they took their made men. They made their made men. So there's nothing above the federal level. They have Goldman Sachs. They have J.P. Morgan. You mess with them, you're whacked.
Well, there's Elliot Spitzer in New York. He was kind of like doing to Wall Street what Rudy Giuliani did to the crime families in New York during his day, but then he was taken out through a massive, discreditation campaign. Smear campaign,
yeah,
he
yes.
did bad things.
Well, so this particular fund, the Central States Pension Fund, has 400,000 members. There are 1.4 million Teamsters across the U.S. And by the way, you talked about films. Martin Scorsese is making a new film about Jimmy Hoffa, who was one of these guys, I believe, in the Teamsters. And they're making a film with him with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. But so the debacle, they say, unfolding at the $16.1 billion Central States Fund in Rosemont, Illinois, is a cautionary tale for all Americans dependent on their retirement savings. Unable to reverse a decade-long outflow of benefits payments over pension contributions, the professional money managers placed big bets on stocks and non-traditional investments between 2005 and 2008 with catastrophic consequences. Now remember, that was back when interest rates were like 5 or 6%. Now they're down at 0%. We don't know what the pension funds are doing on our behalf now. And just in case you don't know who the Teamsters are, those are like, they're truck drivers across the U.S. They're truck drivers in Hollywood, they're truck drivers in New York City, they're truck drivers in various industries.
Oh, yeah. My friend, I got a Teamster buddy in L.A. by the name of Steve, who goes by the name of the Gourmet Teamster because he spends half of his days in Paris living it up on chocolat, eclair, a bonbon.
Well, it looks like he might have to move from Paris down to, say, Mexico City.
I made a
Tijuana.
contact with him. He says he's under some kind of the Writers Guild or something, or some Hollywood freak show. So I think he's safe for the time being. But you know, the point is that these low interest rates, they are destroying pension funds, and they're destroying the insurance industry. And the reason interest rates are going lower is not because the central banks are exercising largesse and they want to stimulate. It's because the economy is crashing. The economy is sinking. There's no genuine organic growth. They keep lowering rates because there is no recovery.
But it's also like we were saying with the mafia. Now we have the Federal Protection Racket. They protect their made men. They protect their banks on Wall Street. And 0% interest rates are a way to transfer money. It's a way to, you know, everybody in the neighborhood has to give their bit to the mob. And
Right.
this is, you're taking out of your savings. You're not actually meeting with J.P. Morgan and saying, oh, here's my, you know, £100 this month or $100 this month. They just take
It's
it.
racketeering.
Yeah,
It's definitely racketeering.
Yeah.
Like in the mafia movie, in the Godfather, there's that guy in the white suit. He walks through the neighborhood. He collects his bit from all the shopkeepers to pay the mob, to pay the Costa Nostra. Now here you have Goldman Sachs. They manage people's pension accounts, or they're in bed with government, or Nancy Pelosi, who's, you know, up on insider trading for many years. Congressional insider trading is legal, and you got to pay the mob. You got to pay the racketeers.
Like, people will say, oh, we don't want the old mob. This mob is better because they don't whack as many. They don't crack your knees. They don't, you know, shake you down in a violent way. They do in a way in that they could incarcerate you. They get the federal government to threaten to throw you into a rape gulag, and that's how they threaten you.
I remember Gaddafi was...
Yeah, he also lost all his money. But now this pension is being taken over by the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is also a government entity which is allegedly almost bankrupt. And I don't know if they have the $16 billion at all to cover this. But when the experiment blew up of Wall Street taking control of this, and remember, by the way, this is from 2005, 2008, they lost 42% of the fund for the Teamsters. This is also, remember, George W. Bush was trying to privatize Social Security. He wanted the same Wall Street guys to take care of Social Security. So with Social Security right now, they always say, oh, it's underfunded, it's underfunded. Well, that would be, it would be bankrupt now if it were for Wall Street. But when the experiment blew up, rather than exhume the devastated portfolio to better understand the problem and perhaps seek accountability, central states administrators lobbied Congress to pass legislation giving them authority to cut retirement benefits by up to 50% after Treasury Department approval. So nobody's looking at it. Nobody's investigating how this fund lost money. And this is what the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation does all the time. They refuse to look at any of their the failures of these pension funds to see what happened, because, of course, they might claw back some of the fees and money paid to the likes of Goldman Sachs in this case.
Well, it's all very primitive, actually. You know, ancient societies, you know, they try to build their dwellings near to the high up on the river, and the fresh water was the source, and living downriver and get all the detritus and the waste and the sewage downriver. You don't want to live there. And here in the modern society, if you are in bed with the central bankers, you get the fresh money printed every single day, which you then can buy some famous oil paintings and watch your assets go up in value. But if you are a worker, you're a Teamster, you live downstream, you're forced to have the money that's been through all this
it's filled
machinery.
with all the vig that's been collected by the Wall Street Mafia. So now, on the most part, most Americans are just accepting this and taking anti-diarrhea medicine to get high, and this is how they're, or, you know, as we see the suicide epidemic and the opioid epidemic across America. But here's another headline that goes with this, as everybody confronts a future where all the promises made to them are being reneged upon. Defense industry poised for billion-dollar profit from global riot contagion. Forecasts of relentless civil unrest in the U.S., Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia seen as massive investment opportunity. So this is a report by Infinity Research Group, and they said the next 5 years will see an international boom in riots, and that this is great for the business, that it's going to be about $5 billion worth of business, $2 billion in the U.S., $2 billion in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and another $1 billion from Asia. The report, they say, also corroborates a forecast made by well-known institutions. A study published in April by leading global insurers Lloyd's of London warns of an imminent future of pandemics of political violence. driven by the contagion effect.
The world is upside down. Hello. This table's in my way.
The table's in your way. Don't break this one, too.
Oh, this is our last table. There. Can you see me now? The world is upside down. And the thing about cheap rates is that it makes war also cheaper to wage. Not only does cheap rates make fraud cheaper to commit by Goldman Sachs, but by making money cheaper, you're giving the Pentagon and other warmongers a cheap way to wage war. That's why we have so much war. It's so cheap to wage war. Raise the cost of waging war. Raise the cost of committing financial fraud. Raise interest rates. You can't solve every problem by dropping bombs and dropping interest rates. That doesn't work. Do you understand?
Okay.
Do you understand?
Why don't you sit back up? It looks like your head's going to explode. So I'll cut to a quote by the guy who runs this Infinity Research Group, like, going, "Were there going to be riots? Yay!" Well, he says protests, riots, and demonstrations are major issues faced by the law enforcement agencies across the world, said Abe Singh, a lead defense technology analyst at the firm. In addition, the increase in incidents of civil wars in countries such as Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Egypt, along with the increase in the global defense budget, will generate demand for riot control systems. So they note with glee places like Ferguson, where they had riots, and they responded by militarizing the police. So this is good for the industry that provides all those military equipment and services to smash heads across, riot zones in America, Europe, and elsewhere.
Look, there's a term in economics for this. It's called perverse incentives. Mm-hmm. When you provide incentives for a perversion of society, you will get a perversion of society. Okay? When you disenfranchise all the institutions that provide a moral ballast, education, the church or the religious institutions, the transportation, the hospitals, and you give all that money to the kakistocracy, the worst amongst us, the warmongers, the racketeers on Wall Street, you end up with a society that breeds unrest and sloth.
And profit.
And sloth. We gotta go.
Unrest and profit.
We gotta go. We gotta go to the second half.
I'm gonna now!
This is getting exciting. You better stay tuned. Don't go away. There's more.